Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abuel-Samad.
So welcome to episode 35. We got the Hespen Rally that you went to. We've got a couple of intrigue stories. Well, one intrigue story, and then the future of the internal combustion engine according to Mazda to cover. So we'll get to that. But first, we'll talk about what we've been driving. And Sam, you were driving this week the car that I was driving last week. Not the exact car, but
the same kind.
Yeah.
Yes. Back in yet another Miata. One more turn in the Miata RF or MX-5 Miata RF or whatever it's actually supposed to be called now. The retractable hardtop Miata. Last time I had the club version, which is the entry level version of the RF, and this time, like you had last week, I had the Grand Touring. Yes, Grand Touring.
Yeah, I can, whatever they want to call it.
Yeah,
the Grand something or other.
Yes, Grand Touring, and still love it. Still a Miata. Still has all the great things about a Miata. Still run. It's quick. Rides great. Handles great. It's a hoot to drive. I still prefer the soft top, but I would not turn my nose up at one of these either.
Yeah, I really I was intrigued by how sort of tractable and flexible and just well-rounded it is, given that it's a small light car with a small engine, and it seems very well thought out. And I guess that's what happens after you spend 27 years. Oh my goodness.
Refining the same basic concept.
Yeah.
It's worked for Porsche on the 911. So
that's true. That's, I didn't think of it that way.
Yeah. They've been doing it for more than 50 years.
Yeah. And there's nothing about a current 911 that's really analogous to the original, other than sort of the basic layout.
Still has a Boxer 6, hanging out behind the rear axle, and a semi-recognizable shape.
That's true. Round headlights, roundish.
Yes, back to roundish headlights. Yeah. After that period in the late 90s, which we will not discuss.
Well, that's the way you can get like that. Those are the last inexpensive modern 911s. That's
true.
The 996.
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
And they're going up in price fast because everybody who wants a car that drives well and can stomach the fact that it shares a nose with the Boxster, it's like, they're still good cars,
Yeah. Hey, from the driver's seat, you can't tell what nose is on there.
Yeah, exactly.
So who cares?
But back to the Miata.
Yes.
So how did this differ from the Club? Is it softer, or just it has more features? I know it has leather and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a wee bit softer. The Club that I had the Brembo brake package. So the braking's not quite as aggressive as the Club was. The wheels, different set of wheels. It's got nice leather seats in there. Other than that, it's actually not all that different. It's got the Club I had most of the options on there. It had the navigation system and everything anyway. As far as, driver assist features, it's fairly minimal. This one does have a lane departure warning system, but I have it turned off just because it's too annoying. And the blind spot monitoring, which actually on the RF, the blind spot monitoring is a little more useful on the RF because the visibility over your shoulders is not quite as good as on the soft top. With the soft top, you look over your shoulder and, at least when the top's down, which is the way it should always be, should be at all times. With the top down, you look over your shoulder and you can see everything. There is effectively no blind spots. With the RF, those flying buttresses, even with the top retracted, give you a pretty decent sized blind spot over your shoulders. And so the blind spot monitoring definitely is a help there. But other than that, it's really not, it's not dramatically different, and that's just fine because there is absolutely nothing wrong with the other version either. So, I mean,
if you're the kind of person though that wants all those driver assist features, do you really belong in a Miata?
Absolutely not.
There's very few vehicles that are more about driving.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the only driver assist feature I would really want in this car is that blind spot monitoring, and only because the RF does have blind spots. The soft top, I wouldn't even bother with the blind spot monitors. You really don't need anything. Just drive it. Yeah, that's what it's meant for. Just drive. Pay attention and put your phone down. Pay attention. Don't even think about buying an automatic. Buy manual only, and do what you're supposed to do in a proper sports car, which is exactly what this is. Yeah, and I haven't driven the new Miata with an automatic, but I was actually really surprised when I drove the old power retractable hardtop of the last generation with an automatic. I thought I was just going to despise it for a week, and I actually I liked it. It still was fun. It's a little different because you're not, shifting your own gears, so maybe a little less engaging, but it was no less enjoyable. It was just different. Yeah. And that's fine. I mean, if you're, I guess, if you do a lot of driving in traffic, the clutch, the clutch pedal is pretty light anyway in a Miata. So it's not like it's terribly difficult or painful. I mean, it's only a 4-cylinder engine, so it's not like you need a big, heavy clutch in that thing. But if if you do, have to commute in traffic on a regular basis, you may want to go for the automatic, or if you just don't like shifting. But, then again, if you don't like shifting, what's the matter with you? Yeah. What's wrong with you, and why are you driving a Miata anyway? Yeah. Also, one of my colleagues shared the, have you seen the head-to-head video, the Motor Trend head-to-head, where they compared the Miata RF and the Toyota 86? No, I have not seen that one yet. It was actually, it was Johnny Lieberman and Jason Camisa, and sometimes Johnny and I don't see eye to eye on things. You don't say. To put it mildly. But their impressions were pretty accurate, and they had Randy Pobst ring them out on the track as well. And it was really interesting to see the two cars back to back like that. And having spent time in both of those cars and just, being able to relate very directly to what they were all talking about. First of all, they really criticized the Miata's styling, which I don't necessarily agree with. I think it's actually a really good looking car. The idea, I guess, is that with this generation, the taillights are a little too close together. It looks a little funky. It's a riot of kind of lines and curves and whatever. Where do you come down in terms of styling? When I first saw it, when I first unveiled it in late 2015, I was less enamored with the look, but over time it has grown on me, and now I love it. I still prefer mine. I still prefer the first two generations, the NA and also the NB, which had integrated headlights. It didn't have the pop-ups, but this has grown on me a lot, and I like it. I think it's a great design. It incorporates some elements of Mazda's contemporary design language, but it still has the perfect proportions for a roadster. It's exactly what it should be, and there's only so much you can do to screw that up. So and I don't think they did screw it up. I think they did a really great job, and it's given it a look that's really unique. There's nothing else quite like it on the road, and I think it works well.
Yeah, I'll agree too. I think when I first saw it, I was like, ooh, those headlights. But otherwise, it has. And I talked about this last week. How there's sort of some Easter eggs in the design. The more and good design is like that. The more you look at it, it appears on its surface to be simple, or it appears at first glance that you've got all there is, and then the more you look at it, the more you discover. That's actually really hard to do, and I feel like they pulled that off quite a bit with the latest Miata. But I was actually looking at the NCs as well, the previous generation, and there's a lot more character in the new car than there was in the outgoing one. The outgoing one was sort of just like oval and soft edged. Yeah,
I agree. I think, like I said, I would not be opposed to having one of these in my garage on a full-time basis.
It's the only thing standing between you and that car is payment. You should be able to do that. Just, go in. They're going to ask you what you want to pay per month. And you're going to tell them that you want to pay $30, and you'll finance it for 40 years.
For longer than the mortgage on my house.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah. Maybe in a few years, I'll get a used one of these to go along with my first generation one.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the nice thing too, is even it's such an affordable car to begin with. As it rides the depreciation curve, it's going to just become that much more attainable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even a good one. So,
all right. So what about you? What are you driving?
I kind of have to apologize to this car because I'm coming off a week with the Miata, which is all about steering feel and driving, being connected to the vehicle. So I got a Ford Edge Sport. It's a dynamic mess. It's so clumsy. And it looks great. It's a really nice shade of like maroon. It's got the Edge Sport has the blacked out grille and the darker wheels. So it's handsome, especially with the new design language that Ford put on the Edge. And it's a pretty solid vehicle. It's old hardware at this point. I think it's actually pushing 10 years old.
Not really, no, because it's built on the new CD platform, so it shares its platform with the Fusion and Mondeo.
I didn't realize that it had gotten updated. I thought it just gotten restyled.
No, they moved it over to the new platform. I mean, the old platform is more than 10 years old because it has its roots in an older Mazda platform. Right.
The first gen Edge came out in 2005. It was the first gen Fusion, essentially.
Yes.
Which was like a 626, yeah.
Yeah, it was derived from an old Mazda platform, which was not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's an architecture that had been around for a while. So this one is all updated. It's based on the current generation Fusion and Mondeo and MKZ platform. So it's got the same suspension architecture as those vehicles. It's lighter than the previous Edge was, but it's still it's not light.
It's solid. It goes down the road solid. And that's what I was going to say is I was impressed with that because I thought it was older than it actually is, but even so, it feels really nice and tight.
So why do you say it's a dynamic mess?
Well, because the steering is just numb and you don't know what's going on with the tires. And, again, some of this might be that I just came off a week with a car where I knew exactly what was going on with the tires. So I don't know, but I find that inside even the controls, like the infotainment or the secondary controls, they require a glance to operate. And in the course of that glance, the thing's wandering. And it's got the lane departure thing that'll like put thumps in the wheel to warn you. when it detects that you're drifting out of your lane.
Mm-hmm.
I just find that anytime I look away, even for a second, it starts to just drift, and you can't really feel it or anything. So I don't know whether it's because it has, the particular implementation of electric power steering that Ford has used, where you don't have that indication of like it's pulling off the crown or something like that, which is one of the things that Ford mitigates with their electronic power steering.
Most companies are doing that now, putting in automatic pull drift compensation to compensate for the road crown. So as you're driving down the road, all roads have a bit of a crown to them. They drop off towards the sides to help water drain off when it rains. And so, what manufacturers, Ford, I think, was the first to do it, but most manufacturers are doing it now, is that this pull drift compensation. So it uses the sensors for the stability control and the steering angle to detect when you're on a crown, and the electric power steering actually does a little bit of adjustment to the steering angle, so that as you're going down the road, it will automatically compensate. So basically, as you drive down a road on a crowned road, the car will still go straight.
Yeah, I found that for whatever reason, it wound up drifting. So maybe it's me. I don't know, but it just I find it doing that a lot. I find that I'm doing a lot of mid-corner corrections, on sweeping turns, because I can't really figure out what the level of grip and the steering angle should be. So that's, I don't want to say that that's just because I spent a week in the Miata. It's because
that's odd, because when I drove an Edge Sport about a year ago, and I did not really experience that. I wonder if maybe there's an alignment issue with the one you're driving.
Maybe if you didn't feel it in the one that you drove, though, it's probably just me.
Yeah.
Well, it's also, it's got those big wheels, and the ride is like a little harsh too.
Right. And all of that does tend to amplify any, big wheels, tends to amplify any kinds of issues like that. The other thing that's in there that I don't think was actually, was in there in the one that I drove, but I think is in there now, is the adaptive steering ratio.
Oh,
So, they've got a system like in the steering wheel hub, like behind the airbag, there's actually a little electric motor, an actuator, and a planetary gear that effectively changes the steering ratio dynamically, so that at higher speeds, it slows it down, so that so you have less tendency for the vehicle to wander at highway speeds. But then at lower speeds, it speeds up the ratio, so that you can get a little bit tighter turning angle when you're maneuvering around in parking lots and things like that.
Huh. That's a very good idea. Maybe that's what's driving me crazy. I don't know. I just felt like it doesn't lock on to straight ahead like it should. It needs a bit of correction on a constant basis. And so, again, it's probably just me.
Yeah, you're probably just being too persnickety.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's pretty lovely. Like I said, it looks good. The Sport is nicely appointed inside. The seats are very comfortable. The space is pretty decent. Sync 3 is Sync 3. I mean, it's
not my Ford Touch.
Right. It's better. I'm surprised at how slow it feels now, because the first time I tried Sync 3, I was like, wow, this is snappy. And that was just a couple of years ago. And now it's starting to feel like the system is pokey to do stuff. Yeah. So that was actually one of the things that stuck out to me, was like when you tune the radio, it's like it gets occupied trying to play like a little animation when you tune up to whatever frequency, and then it wants to do something else. And so if you pause for a minute and then tune again, it it lags because it's like trying to play the little animation because it thinks you're done, and then, oh no, I want to actually give it another command, and so there's that lag time. And I can't believe that somebody at Ford thought it was a good idea to put an animation in the gauge cluster, because they've got the two LCDs that flank the gauges. The right-hand one, if you set it to display the radio, it will continue to flip and show you like the RDS stuff, and there's no way to shut that off. So as you're driving, you've got this text that changes in your periphery, so it's distracting you.
There actually is a way to shut that off.
I couldn't find it. It drove me crazy. I've switched to the compass.
No. What you do is you plug in your phone and you use Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, and then you'll never see that again.
Oh, wow.
And you also won't have to listen to the radio. Why would you want to do that?
Well, we have a very good public radio station here that I listen to during my commute. We actually have several. So there's that. And
you can listen to the NPR One app through Android Auto.
My phone doesn't support Android Auto. So there's that. But that's a good point. It's a fine point. I switched it to the compass because who doesn't need a compass when you're driving? It's pointless, but at least it doesn't animate. No, it's a decent vehicle. I think all of the reasons why I didn't buy an Edge are sort of backed up by this. Just dynamically, it's not pleasing to me. It's not horrible, but it doesn't ring my bell. And I also there's a lot of dashboard. There's a lot of A-pillar. There's visibility wasn't exactly what I wish it would be. That's not just the Edge. That's a lot of cars, and it just to make me feel like the space efficiency isn't as good as it could be for its physical size. But again, being nitpicky, I think, is the order of the day today. So
no, but I mean, that actually is a very valid point that, and it's a common problem to a lot of modern cars, with, thick A-pillars, high belt lines, and it degrades your visibility, degrades your ability to see out of the car and see what's around you. So you actually do become, a lot more dependent on all of these driver assist features, cameras and everything else, to see what's around you, because you can't just look around and see anything there. And I think that's actually that's a real problem. Yeah. I'd prefer. I like to be able to actually just look around and see. Certainly, I think backup cameras are very valuable. To show you what's immediately behind the car, because even in older cars with that have nice slim pillars all around, there's still going to be things that you're not going to be able to see. From the driver's seat. So that is a handy feature, but especially the A-pillars, on a lot of modern cars are very problematic. And, the current generation of a lot of the Ford products do have pretty thick A-pillars. They're not as bad as, some of the previous generation GM vehicles. The current generation GM vehicles have gotten much better at that. Honda's always been pretty good at trying to keep their pillars pretty slim and optimizing visibility. But, and part of it also, is the fact that, it's a utility, so you're sitting up higher, and the body is more, enclosed all around you. So, that's, as we get to automated vehicles, obviously that problem goes away. But, as long as we still have to drive, I think it's important that we should be able to see out of the vehicle without having to rely on the cameras.
Yeah, that's an issue for the automakers, though. They have to wrestle with that, because I think that given their druthers, they'd also want to make it so that, or at least a certain faction within the automaker would also want to make it so that visibility is really good. But there is apparently a psychological sense of security that comes from being cocooned with the door sills up to your earlobes and stuff for a lot of people. I tend to not agree with that idea, but I can understand where it comes from.
I think it's a false sense of security. Because I think you have more security when you can actually see what's around you.
Oh yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
On the other hand, there's two factors driving, this lack of visibility problem. One, is design trends, and the higher belt lines are partly, a modern design trend. But the other factor, of course, is crash safety requirements. Crash safety requirements keep getting tougher and tougher. Occupant protection standards, and especially as we add things like side impact tests and roof crush standards. All of that tends to drive having more sheet metal in various places, and that extra sheet metal, tends to degrade your visibility. So it's a trade-off. You're getting some degree of security from that, but there's also, I think the psychological part of it is not necessarily warranted.
No, it just goes back to people are wrong and they should listen to us because we're not. But that's never going to happen. The loveliest part of the Edge Sport is the 2.7 liter EcoBoost V6. That is a marvelous engine. It's great. It actually has a good throaty rumble when you stomp on it. It's plenty powerful. The first Edge I drove years ago, and I think it was an Edge Sport. Man, did it feel wimpy and overworked. This does not have a problem, and its engine is almost a full liter smaller in displacement than that one was.
Right. Well, yeah, that was a 3.7 liter naturally aspirated V6, and I think it did about 300 horsepower. But you're right; it definitely did not feel as strong as this engine by any stretch of the imagination. And this is the same engine, the 2.7 liter. It's what Ford calls their Nano V6. So it debuted in the F-150 in the 2014 F-150, and then they later added it to the Edge, and it's also in the Fusion Sport now. And then there's a 3-liter version of the same engine it's exclusively used by Lincoln, which has 400 horsepower. And it's in either form. It's a marvelous engine. Yeah,
that's the high point of the Edge Sport. I wanted that engine in the Mustang. Or they can send one to me. I'll put it in the lawnmower or the Crown Victoria or whatever. It's nice. I'm impressed with it. I'm very impressed with it. So anyway, that's enough about the Edge. And I think we've exhausted our Miata quotient for a while, too. So we should talk about stuff. It probably makes sense you attended the Hespen Rally. We talked that up, I guess, for a couple of weeks at the end of the last couple of podcasts, just, about the event and exhorting people to get down there and participate. How was it? How did it go?
It was great. I think we had about 30 people that showed up, which was fantastic. We had an amazing variety of cars. Patrick's wife Gina and his sister Chrissy drove in Patrick's yellow VW Corrado, which is his favorite car. We had, besides mine, there was one other Miata, a red one, which also used to be Patrick's, and he sold that one a couple of years before he died. There was, a Corvette Z06. Mike Austin, ex of Autoblog, brought his Alfa Romeo Spider, which sans top, and fortunately the rain held off since the car literally has no top on it right now, no top installed. Let's see what else we had. GT350. Richard Truitt bought his Honda S2000, and Matt Lever from Ford managed to get to borrow a GT from the engineering team at Ford. He went and picked it up on Sunday morning just before the rally and had to return it immediately afterwards. But he did get to drive around in it for a couple hours, which was great.
do they just have a GT sitting around the engineering department for like, making air quotes here for research, like?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no. I mean, the car just, went into production a few months ago. And, there's ongoing work on the program. They're looking at, what kinds of improvements to make. And, I mean, this was a prototype. It was not, it's not a production spec car, so they can't sell it. So they do tend to keep these around. I mean, they're still, floating around the proving grounds. There's still, a couple of previous generation GTs. One of the things if you spend any time around an automaker, you will find all kinds of interesting cars that have been saved from the crusher. I mean, most prototypes, after development is done, they end up, they by the time development is finished and a car's in production, most prototypes are in pretty rough shape. Even though they may only have 15 or 20,000 miles on them, they tend to be 15 or 20,000 really hard miles.
Well, and they're prototypes too. They're not, right, and they're not production cars.
Yeah, they're they're even more hand built, than a production Ford GT, But they'll keep them around, because they'll go back and revisit them. They may use them at later times to try out some new components. Like for example, the GT350, when they started work on that program some years ago. Let me go back to like 2005 when I was still working in engineering. At that time, when they were working on what would eventually be the GT500 that debuted in 2007, that program, which was internally codenamed Condor, they originally had planned to use an independent rear suspension on that car. And what happened was they actually built two prototypes, and we had one of them in the garage at the company where I worked at the time, and the early development, the first two prototypes had the independent rear suspension on them, and they found that it was the car was just too heavy. Between I don't know if you remember back then, those GT500s, those first GT500s had a cast iron 5.4 liter supercharged V8.
Yeah, they were a pig.
Yeah, so it was heavy, and then you add another 120 pounds or so for the independent rear suspension. The car was just way overweight, and so they ended up canceling the independent rear suspension for that program and going back to a solid rear axle. And those at least one of those cars was saved with the independent rear suspension, and it stuck around, and it actually ended up becoming an early development mule for the GT350 program. So it got used for some of the early work that they were doing on that program before they had actual proper prototypes. So there's all kinds of interesting stuff that's floating around that gets repurposed for other programs later on. Some of them just get preserved because they're historically interesting, and eventually they may end up in a museum somewhere. And some just get stashed away because some engineer didn't want it to get crushed.
Yeah, somebody takes a shine to it.
Yeah, I mean, and one more story, going back to the beginning of my engineering career back in the early '90s when I was working at the GM Proving Grounds in Milford. There was a parking lot, a storage lot on the Proving Grounds, off in a far corner in the middle of what is now the Lutz Ring, the high speed test track that they have there. And back in those days, there were probably a couple of hundred various prototypes, that once the engineers were done with them, they would just go park them back there. And, sometimes they would stay back there for years, and eventually some of them would get hauled off to the crusher, and, others, who knows what happened to them. But I remember, there was probably about 20 C4 Corvettes that had full active suspension systems. This was when GM still owned Lotus, and they were still trying to do, the full hydraulic active suspension system. And they had there was probably about 20 of these black C4 Corvettes with the active suspension. And part of why they never put that into production was because the system just required way too much power. I mean, it was drawing like 40 horsepower off of the engine just to power the hydraulics.
Yeah, and I'm assuming too, its hydraulics is heavy. It's a weight penalty as well. So.
Oh yeah. So those cars stuck around for quite a while after they were done doing testing with them. So that's just the way it is.
Yeah. That's the real interesting stuff, is the weird things that not even just like development mules, just weird stuff you could make if you were determined enough, with all that parts bin sort of at your disposal. It's probably a lot easier to say, I'm going to pick and choose from over here and over there, and we're going to assemble it in this body shell. And I don't know. I mean, for any new vehicle development program, the first stage of testing, is using, what are commonly referred to as mules. I mean, a mule, is a cross between a horse and a donkey. And, I mean, that's literally what these early development prototypes are, is, they'll take an existing vehicle and they'll start putting some new parts on it to test those out, long before they get to the stage of having, regular, prototypes that are representative of the look, that have all the systems of the new vehicle. They'll test individual components and systems on an existing vehicle. So, if especially, around this area, if you live around Southeast Michigan, you will frequently see some odd looking vehicles that look vaguely familiar, but yet somehow slightly different. Early Mustang, development cars, for the current generation Mustang were based on the S197, and they, if you look, you can see, there were all kinds of early spy photos that you would see the, cut up rear fascias, and, sometimes if somebody managed to get close enough to one, you could see the independent rear suspension under there, and various other bits that were changed. But that's the nature of the business. Yeah, I think that's why a lot of enthusiasts or a lot of folks think it would be a really fascinating job to be an engineer and to sort of work in that. And I'm sure that it's not as cool as it seems on a daily basis, but still,
it depends what you're working at.
Yeah.
If you're working on the Ford GT program, I think it's probably pretty cool.
Yeah, probably doesn't suck.
Yeah.
Speaking of engineering programs that are probably pretty cool as well, Honda sort of, Mazda sort of set everybody on their ear again earlier this week with not only the announcement, which was last week, of their tie-up with Toyota, but this week they said, oh, by the way, we've got this thing called Skyactiv X. It's an engine. It's a gasoline engine that acts like a diesel, which we've seen before. It's a homogeneous charge compression ignition. But apparently Mazda says they've solved the looming problems with those engines, because they're not the first ones to try. They apparently seem to be the first ones that are successful enough to actually bring this to commercial production.
Yeah, well, they announced earlier this week that they're going to launch the Skyactiv X engine, which is, the first, assuming nobody else comes out with something sooner, will be the first production HCCI engine to hit the streets. And back in 2007, 2008, there were a bunch of companies working on HCCI. And there's still, some of them are still working on it. I remember, in fact, it was 10 years ago this month at a GM powertrain event at the Proving Grounds. I was there, and they had a couple of prototype Saturn Auras with HCCI engines in them. I wrote up that I had a chance to drive one, and wrote up a detailed tech analysis, which we'll link to at Autoblog Green back in those days. And then a couple of years later, I had another. They had a newer generation of that, and I had a chance to drive it again. And it was definitely improved, but there were always issues. So just as a little primer, traditionally, we've had two types of piston engines in cars. You've had auto cycle gasoline engines, spark ignition engines that, or let me go back, two types of four-stroke engines, two main types of four-stroke engines. So you had spark ignition engines that ran on gasoline or ethanol or, something else like that, and after you compress the air fuel mixture as the piston goes up on its compression stroke, you would use a spark plug to ignite that fuel, and as it expands, it pushes the piston back down. Then you have compression ignition engines, which the most commonly known common type of that is the diesel engine. And instead of having a spark plug, they use a higher compression ratio and a different type of fuel, so that as the piston goes up and compresses the air and fuel, when you compress a gas like air, the temperature goes up. And it was compressed enough that the temperature would rise to a point where the fuel would self-ignite. So that's a diesel engine. And those compression ignition engines tend to produce more torque, and they tend to be more efficient than spark ignition engines. But they, with diesel fuel, they tend to have issues with emissions of particulates and NOx. And so what engineers have been trying to do for a long time now is figure out a way to use compression ignition with gasoline. And, so that's where the HCCI comes from. But because of the nature of the way gasoline burns and everything, you can't really do compression ignition under all circumstances. So what they've had to do is come up with ways, to switch back and forth. So, in some modes, certain light duty modes, they, still use spark ignition. And then at other times they switch to compression ignition, and it's that transition, trying to expand the operating range of the compression ignition, and trying to make the transition between spark and compression as seamless as possible, that has been the problem. And Mazda claims to have been able to lick that, and they're claiming that they can get about 25 to 30% better fuel efficiency with their SkyActiv X engine than a comparable SkyActiv G engine, which is their current generation of direct injected gasoline engines.
Yeah, I mean, that puts it on par with diesels in terms of getting roughly 40% efficiency out of it. And like you say, it's not the first try for automakers to do it. So I kind of just wonder what's different. Even those Delphi cars that you were driving, and I remember that they were mostly well sorted out. It's just those transitional things, or part throttle or stuff where the emissions go way up. So what's changed? Is it faster processors? Is it just a better understanding of how things operate? Because it's chaos. There's so many variables to control, and in this situation, that it just becomes really difficult to actually get it to work.
At this point, we don't know.
Yeah.
They have not revealed those details yet, and we probably won't know for a while yet, because the engine's not coming till 2019.
Yeah. That's true. It's part of the funny part to me was it's part of the Sustainable Zoom 2030 long-term vision.
Yeah. Which, also includes, more electrification in their engines, and, more lightweighting, and, all the other usual things. And they'll be launching some battery electric vehicles around 2020, adding some hybrids, which they'll, presumably be sharing some technology with Toyota for those from their partnership with Toyota. So we'll see it's going to, like I said, probably sometime next year we'll start to learn more. But actually, just last night as we're recording this, had a call with Dan Nicholson, who's the vice president of propulsion systems engineering at GM, and he confirmed that they're still working on HCCI in the lab. They've got HCCI engines running in vehicles and on the dynos. They just have not gotten it to a point, gotten it refined enough to a point where they're satisfied with it to put it in production yet. And he wouldn't commit to any kind of timeline for when that might happen. But they're going to be looking anxiously to see what Mazda has done, see if they can learn any lessons from that they might be able to apply to their own engines.
Yeah, well, and if you're GM, you're going to operate with I think an abundance of caution as you bring new and innovative engine technology to the market. They've
gotten burned once or twice.
Yeah, a little bit. And the flip side of that is, though, it's funny to make jokes even about stuff like the V8 6.4, right? But they tried it. They were too early to market, but the technology wasn't ready. The supporting technology wasn't ready for the V8 6.4 or for cylinder deactivation, as we refer to it today. Works pretty damn good now.
But the concept was great. And it's getting better. One of the things we're going to see in engines within the next couple of years, and actually next week or the week after next, I'll be going to a briefing at Delphi where they're going to be talking more about technology they've been developing with a company out of Silicon Valley called not Turo. I can't remember the name of the company, but it's called Dynamic Skip Fire. And the cylinder deactivation systems that we have in the market today, will shut off, 2 or 3 or 4 cylinders on an engine, but it's always the same cylinders, and so it's. It's very, it's a more limited scope of variability than what's possible with dynamic skip fire. The dynamic skip fire system, and I think back in January or so, we had an interview I did with Jim Zizelman from Delphi talking a bit about that. But basically, it randomizes the selection of which cylinders are going to be shut off, and it can shut off, on a V8 engine, it can shut off up to 6 cylinders, I think, and switch back and forth, between which cylinders are running and which ones are turned off, in order to maintain smooth operation and minimize the emissions and everything else. So those systems are going to improve fuel efficiency even more. And hopefully, if assuming it works as planned, we'll have cleaner emissions and be even more reliable.
Yeah, well, and let's not forget too. Mazda may have a funny name for their long-term vision, but I love what they're doing because it's a big picture approach. To quote them, they say, it's prioritizing efficiency improvements and measures for cleaner emissions that apply in the real world. So instead of just jumping to EVs and hybrids or continuing to just make gains in the engine side of things, they're really taking a whole systems way of thinking. They're, can we make the car lighter? Can we reduce friction? Can we improve aerodynamics and make the engines more efficient? And that as compound gains.
Right. And at the management briefing seminars last week where I saw Robert Davis speak, he emphasized, and this was before the official announcement came out, but he talked about a lot of the same themes around trying to optimize real world efficiency and, get real reductions in emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and looking at it from a total life cycle, a well to wheels perspective, rather than just at the dyno when they're doing the certification tests, but looking at the total emissions, not only from the vehicle but also from the production process of whatever type of fuel or energy the vehicle's using. So they're, for, certain applications in certain regions, they feel that they can have a greater impact with more efficient internal combustion engines, and for other vehicles, and depending on the region, they're going to do electrification, they're going to do hybrids and EVs, but they want to focus those on the well, at least partly on the regions where they're required by law to do it, by like, for example, the California ZEV mandate, but also focus on regions where the electricity production is also cleaner. So, they don't want to sell EVs in regions where there's a lot of electricity generated from burning coal,
right.
But focus on, natural gas and solar and wind power, that are going to be cleaner, from a well-to-wheels perspective. And that's why, one of the things that I neglected to mention last week, but, an interesting point that Davis made during his speech was he actually called for the elimination of EV mandates and also tax incentives for EVs, and instead to focus the mandates on overall life cycle emissions, and leave it technology agnostic. Let the manufacturers come up with the cleanest overall approach, for every application, rather than say you have to do it in this particular way.
Yeah, I think that was written up in Automotive News, and I love that because it's such a holistic way of doing it, and it's focused on the results instead of the tactics, and that's apparently the way I think. So
define the goal that you're trying to reach, which is lower greenhouse gas emissions or lower energy consumption, and let the engineers figure out the best way to get there.
Yeah. So Mazda just once again continues to charm the enthusiast and sort of the geek in all of us. And
march to the beat of their own drummer.
Yeah, which is fantastic. So let's talk about Uber.
Oh, what a downer.
I don't think
well, actually, in this particular story, I guess, is a bit less of a downer.
Yeah.
But just in general, talking about Uber is depressing.
Well, yeah, I'm surprised it actually took this long. So what happened was Travis Kalanick got himself sued by a venture capital company called Benchmark Capital. And they are suing him for fraud, breach of contract, and breach of fiduciary duty. Those are big words. I guess the actual stuff he did was he tried to sort of solidify his power and bring and make some moves behind the scenes so he can come back as CEO eventually. And Benchmark was not happy with that.
Right. So, fiduciary duty, basically, means that, you have, as an executive of a company or an officer of a company, you have a responsibility to, lead the company in a way that you maximize returns for your investors, and do it within the law. So that's what that amounts to. And Benchmark was one of the early VC firms that invested in Uber, and in fact they own a 13% stake in the company. Kalanick himself now only has a 10% stake in the company, so they own more shares of Uber than Kalanick does. And they decided that some of the things that Kalanick has been doing, have been detrimental to the company, and so they're suing him for basically being irresponsible in the way he ran the company, and even being irresponsible in the things he's been doing since he stepped down as the CEO of the company.
Yeah, and so Benchmark to rectify the situation, they want to get rid of some board seats that were added, and kick him off the board of directors. This company just are they ever going to get it together, or
Maybe. I mean, if Benchmark succeeds in this lawsuit, this could actually be a big step towards the company getting their stuff together. Since Kalanick stepped down as CEO a couple of months ago, the company's been trying to find a new CEO, so far without success. I mean, there's been speculation about all kinds of potential people to take it over. I mean, they were looking at a number of female executives that they were hoping, they were hoping to bring in a woman to lead the company. And there was speculation that they were looking at Sheryl Sandberg, the COO of Facebook, Marissa Mayer, the former CEO of Yahoo, and Meg Whitman, who's the current CEO of HP Enterprise.
I mean, all of those don't seem like good choices to me, just like given the history, and they all seem like very image-related choices. And maybe I'm wrong on that.
I mean, I think Marissa Mayer probably would not have been the best choice. I mean, let's face it, she was not particularly successful during her tenure at Yahoo.
I think there were a lot of factors to that, though.
Yeah, but I mean, she also made a fair number of mistakes. I think. I mean, she tried to do a lot of good things, but a lot of it didn't work out for a wide variety of reasons. Sandberg, has been amazingly successful at Facebook, and in many ways, she is a big part of the reason why Facebook as a company has been as successful as it has. I mean, she came in, fairly early on, working side by side with Mark Zuckerberg. When Zuckerberg was still pretty young, as a CEO, pretty inexperienced, and Sandberg had a lot of experience at Google before going to Facebook, and she's very highly respected. Similarly, Meg Whitman, has been pretty well regarded in the technology business. She previously ran eBay and now runs HP. She was brought in to try to sort things out after there was a mess with previous executives at HP.
Oh yeah, Carly Fiorina left that company and yes.
Right, and then then there was a bit of a scandal around the prior CEO, Mark Hurd, who's now at Oracle. But so she's Meg Whitman is pretty well regarded. But a couple of weeks ago, Meg Whitman posted on Twitter that she is not interested in the CEO job at Uber. She doesn't want to leave HP. She's happy where she is, and she publicly took herself out of the running for that position. And subsequently, some reports started coming out that one of the reasons why Whitman disqualified herself was because Kalanick has been, even though he's no longer the CEO, he's still on the board. He's been interfering with the search process, hoping that he can basically stymie them from hiring anybody else and have them beg him to come back as CEO. And this is part of what Benchmark is suing over, because there's kind of an odd structure on the Uber board. When you mentioned that they were trying. Benchmark wants to eliminate 3 board seats,
which were added in 2016 through maneuvering.
Right. Kalanick, wanted to have those extra board seats added. He wanted to expand the board, and it's thought that he wanted to bring in people who were going to be loyal to him.
Right. Almost like the idea of packing the court. Right. Like so.
Yeah. Or yeah, exactly. So. He, as CEO, one of the seats on the board is reserved for the CEO. And so as CEO, he had an automatic board seat. When he resigned as CEO, he had to give up that board seat, but he was given one of those 3 board seats that he requested last year. And, the other 2 have never been filled. And supposedly, when as part of his resignation letter, he was supposed to rescind any involvement in the search process, and also but when those 3 board seats were added, part of the stipulation was that he would assign who would get those board seats. And so, when he resigned, he was supposed to give up that right to name those 3 board seats. And so Benchmark, that's one of the claims in Benchmark's suit. And, there's a couple other things that there's like 5 total claims, I think, in their suit. His involvement in the Waymo lawsuit, claiming that he knew more about what was going on there. The India rape case, mishandling of the victim's medical records, all of the sexual harassment in the corporate culture, and also the Gray Ball program, which was this effort they had to basically to stymie regulators.
So all of these are. I feel like Benchmark is completely, within reasonable rights. This isn't just a pissing match between, whatever you want to call a visionary founder and now the VC guys who want their payday. No, like these are kind of shady things that have been going on, and there's a string of them. There's a history of them, and then just bad PR, and when you got an asset or a company that you've invested in that's sitting on right now it's got a valuation of $70 billion. You don't want that to tumble. You don't want that to drop to 30 or to 50 because it's the CEO is just a hot mess. So it's a defensive move to protect their money. And so looking at it from my perspective, they're completely within their rights in terms of, making sure that their investment isn't really like sabotaged. That's why you have boards. That's why you have sort of structures like this to keep those elements in check.
Yeah, I totally agree. And even more so, I think, given everything that's happened, I think I don't think it's wise to keep Kalanick on the board, to allow him to continue to have any kind of involvement in the company. I think he was in many ways a really terrible leader for the company. In some respects, the company was as successful as it was because he pushed so hard. But I think I think he probably did a lot more damage than good to the company and its reputation. And I think it would be best for Uber for Kalanick to be completely separated in every way from the company.
Yeah, and I can understand that's a tough thing to swallow when you've built this thing and it you're really great at some parts of it, but the stuff that I've seen Uber be not great at are really what's going to let it be successful. Because it's we've talked about this too. It's almost like they only have a certain window before things shift right up from under them, and mobility looks different. And that's already starting to happen. And I've talked about this and written about this before. That I think over the medium to long term, companies like Uber and Lyft are not going to survive as standalone companies. They are not going to be the ones to lead the transformation to autonomous mobility services, because if they have to start either building or buying vehicles and maintaining those vehicles and managing those vehicles, the cost is just going to be horrendously high, and it's not going to make sense for them as standalone companies to do that. And a prime example of that came this week, with the reports that Uber was shutting down its leasing program that it had for drivers, vehicle leasing program, because they ended up losing way more money than they anticipated on this program. And what they were doing was a program similar to what GM has with Lyft, with the Express Drive program, where they were leasing new vehicles to drivers that wanted to use them on the Uber platform, and the lease price included insurance and maintenance on those vehicles, and then the payments for the lease would just be taken directly out of the driver's pay.
And in general, I think that's actually, for a ride hailing company, it's actually a good idea to do that when you especially given the nature of the people that are driving for the company. It's often younger drivers or people that are lower income, and they may not have the financial wherewithal to buy or lease a new vehicle on their own. So to set up a program where they can get affordable, get a new vehicle that's going to be appealing to drive in this kind of business, as a ride hailing business, at an affordable price point. I think it benefits the drivers and theoretically benefits the company operating the service. The problem is, because Uber, doesn't make vehicles, they had to buy new vehicles from manufacturers and finance them and set up all the financing. And they borrowed like $1 billion to do this, to fund this program. And they were losing. They anticipated initially that they would be losing about $500 per vehicle, and they've been losing about $9,000 per vehicle because the cost of financing for them was way more than what they were able to get back, in terms of payments to drivers and the revenue that the drivers were generating. So they're shutting down that program by the end of this year. And if you think about it, going forward, if they have to buy vehicles, autonomous vehicles from somebody, they're going to be in the exact same position. Whereas a car maker that is already manufacturing the vehicles has their own built-in captive finance arm, like most automakers do. They can finance the cost of these vehicles at a much lower cost than a company like Uber can, or Lyft. And it makes a lot more sense for them to do it because, any manufacturer that's going to be selling vehicles to an Uber to do a program like that, they're going to be building in a profit margin for themselves on top of that. If a car maker is doing this internally for their own service, the numbers can work out in a very different way. They don't have to build in that profit up front on the cost of the vehicle. Yeah, well, and
so Uber, look, if they borrowed $1 billion or they spent $1 billion on cars once more, they got 70 more tries at that.
Well, just because their market valuation is $70 billion doesn't, that's not how much,
right.
They've only got a few billion in the bank.
It's not the cash they're sitting on. But the whole operation seems to bleed money. I've gotten asked about this just in passing. Well, what do you think about Uber? Great ideas, great sort of innovative thinking. Some of the stuff is going to work and be viable. Some of it right now only works because there's a lot of money floating around, and they're subsidizing every ride for the most part. The prices are going to have to rise to make that sustainable without being propped up. And then you're back to what a taxi ride costs. Right now it's sort of artificially inexpensive. It's very popular. It's easy to use. The technology is one thing. The actual cost, I think, is artificially low, and that's going to bite at some point.
Right, and that's why Uber, lost $3 billion last year.
Yeah, I don't know what CEO is going to take a look at that and go, I don't think that's a sandwich I want to take a bite at.
Right.
I can see that being part of the calculus too, because the CEO want to have success. They don't want to, and there are CEOs that are turnaround. Well,
fortunately the modern financial markets don't seem to really give a damn about success. They're more interested in potential growth than actual successful companies.
I wish I could fail upward like that. I really do. All right. Well, if we're going to talk about failure, we should take some questions.
Okay.
And we had a couple. Let me just switch tabs here, and I will bring up the first one. We had one from Twitter that was we put the call out, and so our listener, I'm going to mangle the name, but it's Twitter, so it is what you want it to be anyway. Surtur via Twitter asked, I think, just sort of our opinion of a Mazda version of the upcoming Toyota Supra BMW Z4 with a Wankel engine. Yes, all of the Wankels, all the time.
Yeah, why not?
I love those. It's a cool engine.
I don't expect it to become a reality, but
No.
I would love it if it did.
It would be so awesome. I really want a sedan version of the Miata. I like that platform. Give it a little stretch in the wheelbase. It doesn't even have to be like a 4-door. Just make it a 2-door. But just that car as a sedan would be fascinating.
Yeah, that could be fun. I could go for that.
Yeah. A little more useful. Yes, you'd give up a little bit dynamically, but same basic width, maybe a little bit more height, and a little extra length, and I don't know. I just liked it. So we have another question that came in from the actual site. Somebody left a comment, so I apologize. We're just getting around to this now because it's been there a while, about 5 episodes late on it. But Amber via the site comments said, hey, I have a dilemma coming up in January. For years I've had VW GTIs, every version since the Mark IV. Loved the hell out of them, but in January Amber's lease is up on a Mark VII, and with it, bad timing in the model switch and the emissions debacle. So Amber is thinking of departing from VW. Additionally, the fact that she thinks VW is behind the times with tech and their terrible packaging of upgrades. So Amber would like to explore something new. Still loves hatchbacks. A Greyhound dog that needs to fit into the equation, so something that has a hatch, including small or medium-sized SUVs. And so let's see. The vehicles.
Well, I would definitely recommend taking a look at the Kia Forte 5 SX or the new Hyundai Elantra GT.
The Elantra GT's been getting. I haven't driven one yet, but it's been getting a lot of really positive comments.
They're doing a regional drive here next week, I think, or the week after. So I'll have a chance to drive that one. But both of them have the same powertrain. It's a Hyundai Kia 1.6 liter turbo, 201 horsepower. It's available with 6-speed manual or with a 7-speed DSG or DCT dual clutch transmission, which is it's a fabulous transmission. The one that Hyundai has built is really good, really smooth, quick shifting. The 6-speed manual version is fantastic as well. Really slick shifting transmission. I would definitely take a look at one of those. They're both good looking vehicles that, they've each got, kind of their own unique look. They're roomy, they're fun to drive.
Yeah. They're also
good dynamics.
Yeah. Those are both going to fit comfortably under her price cap of $35,000.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can get into either one of those, low to mid 20s. So that's, I think those are an excellent choice. Mazda 3 is great, but even the 2.5 is not going to be quite as sprightly as what you can get with one of the turbos from the Koreans or from a GTI. I
mean, I really liked the Mazda 3, but compared to the GTI, it felt, I don't want to say it felt delicate, but it just didn't have that seriousness of purpose about it that a GTI has. And maybe it's because, we're comparing Mazda 3 versus GTI. It might be a little different, 3 versus straight Golf, but it's a great car to drive. So you should definitely try it. And one of her questions is, could I live with a Mazda 3 after so many GTIs? you'll notice the power difference, but there are things about the Mazda 3 that are very nice.
Oh yeah, I mean, the interior is great.
Yeah.
The driving dynamics are fantastic, and the latest version, the 2017 models have a torque vectoring system in there that apparently works really well. I haven't had a chance to drive a 17 yet with that system, but it's a fantastic car. I would also.
Don't say focus. Don't say focus.
No, I was actually not going to recommend that one. I was going to recommend the Honda Civic, the Civic hatchback. It's a little bit down on power compared to your GTI, but the 1.5 turbo is a really torquey little engine. Unfortunately, Honda has opted not to do an SI hatchback, which I think would have been a perfect choice for you. But even the base model, at 174 horsepower, it's got lots of torque. It's a strong feeling engine. I would definitely take one of those out for a test drive and see what you think. The 6-speed manual version is fantastic.
It's very good.
And even the CVT is nice. I mean, we have my wife and I have a Civic hatch with a CVT, and it's a great option as well. So those are the ones I would take a look at.
I mean, there's not necessarily a great amount of choice for a hatch with some sporting intentions. You could, and the mention of crossovers was made too. So you could go, there's a new Tiguan that's coming out that's a little lower.
Yeah, I think she was leaning away from Volkswagen now.
I know.
So I mean, if you're gonna consider crossovers, then I would take a look at the CX-5, the Mazda CX-5.
Yep. I was gonna say
or the CRV,
the Soul Turbo, which is not exactly a crossover, but it's not exactly a hatchback. It's a thing.
Yeah, but it's a good thing, and it's got lots of room for a dog.
Yeah.
Even for a big dog, got decent performance. It's fun to drive.
It's not as refined. Cool. Yeah, it's not as refined as the GTI, but
no. But few cars are at that price point.
Right. I think its rough edges are entertaining rough edges.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you feel about recommending a Mini? Because you could get into a Mini for it's especially a CPO Mini for $35,000. I don't know, because for me there is nothing besides. I mean,
I think for what she's looking for, probably you'd probably want to go for a Countryman.
Yeah.
Because I think the Mini hardtops would probably be on the small side, maybe a Clubman. But
Clubman would.
You're probably looking at a Countryman though, to accommodate a Greyhound comfortably.
Yeah, that's true.
It's worth taking a look. I mean, they haven't always had. Mini hasn't always had the greatest reliability record. Which is, I mean, that's the main reason I hesitate.
Right. And I feel like
they are fun to drive.
Yeah. If it's even so now that they've rejiggered their engines, even the 3-cylinder turbo in the Cooper trims is good. Mm-hmm. And I don't know off the top of my head if the Countryman has that or if it's still carrying on with the legacy engines.
Well, they have a new second generation Countryman now, which I believe has the 1.5 3-cylinder turbo.
So that's how much I've paid attention to Mini lately. But for me, Mini starts at Cooper S.
Yeah.
And any Cooper S trim of any model is going to be pretty fun and have pleasing power and decent handling. They can get a little too self-amused, and that's sort of where I hesitate. Where I'm like, okay, it's just fashion statement. More.
Yeah, I mean, the having the big central dial and everything, it is kind of funky, So I mean, it's worth taking a look at, see what you can find in a CPO model, because I think a new one is probably going to be bumping up against that price ceiling that you're looking at. What else? I think that's enough choices.
We have covered the bases.
Yeah,
rather well. And I don't know if this question came in for just me via Twitter, or both of us for the show, but I'm going to ask it on the show anyway. So Dennis asks me, he says he's starting a Craptastic Auto YouTube channel. Good for you. What crappy car should be my first? To make a video out of. And I asked, does it need to be current or old? And he says it doesn't matter. So my feedback was,
if you're gonna go for crap, then you might as well go all the way and get a Yugo.
Right. Well, so see,
if you can find one that hasn't completely decomposed yet.
I don't feel that the Yugo was crap. I feel that the Yugo was a victim of circumstances. Now the Vega, on the other hand, the Vega was crap. It's wonderful engineering, such garbage execution. And I told him, like, on the modern end of things, I hated the Scion XB. So
the second generation or the first or both?
Second. The first was fun. Yeah. First was pure. The second was just no. They fixed everything that people complained about, and by doing that, they made it awful.
If you're gonna go for bad 70s cars, you should really consider a Pinto as well.
The Pinto was pretty awful. Yep. Yeah. There's a lot.
Most cars built in the 1970s, especially the first half of the 70s, I think would really qualify pretty well for this.
Yeah.
For this category. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to go wrong with just about anything built in that era. What
amazes me is that was just normal. That was accepted. It was good. It was
what it was. I mean, it was what you had to choose from.
Yeah, I get. I mean, unless you wanted to be a communist.
I don't know that I would say that anybody was particularly satisfied with the options, but they were what they were, and unless you were going to go for one of the go for like a Mercedes Benz or something like that, there wasn't a whole lot of options. I mean, everything was really pretty bad.
You've got a fertile decade to mine.
So maybe the channel should just be called the Glam Rock Era Cars channel.
You could call it Ziggy Cardust.
There you go.
You're welcome.
Perfect.
But if you wanted a more modern car, that's the thing. Like I have a little bit more, because we can always sort of poke fun at the past. A more modern car. That's why I said that the XB.
Smart.
Yeah. Oh, Smart. Smart's a really good one. Smart was not good here in the US. I don't know what it seems like. It was better in Europe with the different transmission and stuff, but just not good here.
First generation Kia Sportage was a very bad car.
That was like the late 90s. Right?
Yeah.
That was before they got bought. That was when they were sort of like a Mazda's subsidiary.
More like a licensee. They weren't really a subsidiary. I don't know if Mazda actually had an equity stake.
Oh, that's true.
I think Ford at one point had an equity stake.
Well, because Kia made the Aspire.
Which almost caused the company to expire.
Yeah. So they sort of learned stamping and assembly because of Ford and Mazda, right? Because I think they built the 121 as well for a while.
Yeah, the original Festiva and whatever the Kia branded version of that was sold overseas was a 121,
right?
And then the Aspire was built off the next generation, derived from the next generation 121.
Did you know that the Festiva is like a cult car? There are people who hoard multiple cars and just love them. I had no idea.
I was not aware of that.
It's weird.
But speaking of mules, which we talked about earlier in the show, one more fascinating development mule. The development mules for that first generation Sportage were actually based on the Festiva. Imagine a Festiva body shell, jacked up onto a tiny SUV frame. Yes, they had Festiva body shells on those early generation, those first generation Sportage development mules.
Oh, now I want one because that sounds kind of badass.
Yeah. Unfortunately, by the time they got to production, they were just bad.
Yeah, and they had a Mazda engine to her. Yeah. It was a Mazda engine design.
The Festiva did. I don't think the Sportage was a Mazda-derived engine. I think that was an internally designed engine.
Oh, I remember those when they first came out.
The thing that struck me about those Festivas or the Sportages, I had a chance to drive one on the test track, as an engineer with a former employer, and it was a pretty scary vehicle to drive.
Did you roll it?
I did not roll it. I managed to get through my 17-year career of developing slip control systems and never actually rolled a vehicle all the way over. I came very close on several occasions, but never actually put one on its roof.
Well, Jesus, I did that within the first 2.5 months of driving. I've rolled a car.
Yeah, I've somehow managed to get through, so far, 30 plus years without rolling anything.
It's thrilling.
Crumpled a few cars, but never rolled one.
Oh, well, good. I think we gave him a plenty of food for thought for his cars. We even gave him a show name, so I would like some credit. But anyway,
all right, we got one more segment for the show for this week, which is a conversation we had yesterday.
Yeah,
with
Colin Sultan of 3M.
Yeah, and 3M is doing some very interesting stuff, around the automated and connected car space. 3M's not a brand name you typically think of, with in terms of high technology automobiles, but they do a lot of things, that make driving possible. As to paraphrase the old was it BASF tagline? They don't make the stuff you buy, but they make the stuff that makes the stuff you buy. Something like that.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah,
I think it was BASF or either way.
Right. So 3M does a lot of interesting stuff, and we had an interesting chat with Colin yesterday. So drop that in here.
All right. Well, let's get started. So we're speaking with Colin Sultan. You are global manager with 3M, and we're talking about the Connected Roads division.
I manage the 3M Connected Roads business. I work for the Transportation Safety Division, and our division is all about safety and mobility and bringing home families safely.
All right. And so 3M is no stranger to road safety. I mean, I spent summer making road signs that we made very liberal use of Scotch-Lite, reflective plastic, for example. But with Connected Roads, it seems like you're looking at active technology, and you've partnered with the Michigan Department of Transportation on a stretch of I-75 to test advanced technology. Why don't you set us up a little bit and sort of explain what's going on with that?
This is correct. So for 75 years, 3M Transportation Safety has been innovating and developing technologies for transportation safety, mostly around human vision and how our eyes can see retroreflective signs and pavement markings, for example. And as these mega trends around urbanization, around government funding, around connected and road safety continue to evolve, it's been important to us to be able to innovate around the areas within these mega trends, especially around automated and connected vehicles. And so in this evolution of these vehicles, they're using sensors within those vehicles, cameras, LiDAR, ultrasonic, radar, and it's our belief and it's our strategy to be able to enable intelligent transportation to continue to happen within infrastructure through enabling these systems within the vehicles to create greater safety through redundancies, for example, to be able to see signs, to be able to see materials that we embed into signs, which is one of the core businesses in 3M, as well as pavement markings, which is another core manufacturing area that we have expertise in, so that these vehicles can actually see pavement markings, for example, when a GPS system may not work, or see pavement markings when there's snow on top of the lines, or sleet or fog, for example. And so it's our belief that we can develop, and we are developing technologies to be able to allow these vehicles to sense different materials and technologies that we have.
Yeah, I mean, localization of automated vehicles, enabling the vehicles to be able to determine where they are in physical space is a crucial part of automation. So what sorts of things is 3M doing? You mentioned being able to figure out where the vehicle is in the lane, even when it's covered with snow. How would you do that? I mean, what sorts of technologies would you implement to do that?
Well, there's one thing that we've learned through working with the ecosystem, or our ecosystem and our partners, is that GPS does not always work and is not always as accurate as needed to be able to navigate a vehicle. So we believe that there's redundancies in the infrastructure that we have expertise on over the 78 years. And so imagine a sign that would be able to be seen by a human and meet the MUTCD guidelines, so it looks like a stop sign, it's red. A human would see it as they would see it today. But imagine being able to embed technologies into that sign that a camera would be able to see in a different spectrum of light, for example, and be able to provide information to the driver and or the vehicle, as well as, to your question, GPS, GIS location, longitude and latitude, and be able to help that vehicle with redundancies when a GPS system may not work. And some examples of those locations would be in an urban canyon in a city, in a tunnel, out in the country. There's many different examples of where we could help provide that vehicle the GIS location to be able to, kind of certify or give credibility that the vehicle is where the vehicle says it is. But also, when those GPS systems may not be working, then to help keep that vehicle on the road, you continue to need pavement markings so that those vehicles will sense a line with the cameras and keep that vehicle on the road. We've heard that from different partners, as well as different companies who are testing different technologies, mostly around GPS system, with those different sensors in the vehicles, as well as automobile AOEMs who are testing different technologies as well. So really, the key word here is around redundancies, and how when one system is not working, there's other systems that will be able to help fall back on in all different types of situations.
So, for example, Mobileye and Bosch both have programs with car makers and with map makers to take sensor data that they collect about landmarks as the vehicle drives down the road, fixed landmarks, and get the position of those landmarks and feed it back into a data center, aggregate it, and then incorporate it into high definition maps, and then feed that back to the vehicle fleet, so that information can be used by the vehicles locally to triangulate where, to figure out their position in space. Is that the sort of thing you're talking about, or is it something even beyond that?
Yeah, that's one example, and we're actually involved in some of that work as well. but we can also provide through infrastructure that's already out on the road today and retrofitting and or fabricating future signs. We can actually provide the exact location, GIS longitude and latitude through infrastructure that we have available through retroreflective signs and or other materials. That's just one example of doing this, but yes, there's other examples of triangulating through different infrastructure, bridges, signs, their location through GPS and 3D mapping. So this is slightly different.
Okay, so talking about signs, there was an interesting report that just came up in the past week of some researchers testing out one particular machine learning vision algorithm, and they were able to fool the system into misreading some stop signs. They put some strategically placed pieces of white and black tape on a stop sign, and the stop sign, or the machine vision algorithm, misread that. Instead of seeing it as a stop sign, it saw it as a 45 mile per hour speed limit sign. And is there, are there some of the things that you're doing, things that could help mitigate that, to help to try to help guarantee that the signs get read properly, and maybe perhaps minimize the chances of having an impact from that sort of vandalism if someone were to tamper with signs in that way?
This is a discussion that we have often, and the answer to your question is yes. I read that article, and that's being done through optical character recognition through cameras. And we believe some of these technologies that I discussed with you earlier would be able to give the credibility of the read to the vehicle. We would be able to help through the algorithm be able to tell that vehicle that it is reading what it is reading in this embedded technology that we have through films and or inks on signs. So it would read a certain code that we would embed, and we would give it the credibility of that read rate to be able to prevent some of the cybersecurity areas that you're discussing. These are all these discussions are all concepts in testing, so they're not commercially available at this point. But they're areas that we're testing, as you mentioned earlier, around Michigan DOT corridors between Detroit and Ann Arbor, and testing that we're doing in other states around the United States.
So, just as an example of, you mentioned codes embedded in the sign, would that be something analogous to like the microdots that are generated by certain printers, some types of printers that can be used to identify exactly which piece of hardware generated a particular printout? Is that the sort of thing?
I think it would be slightly different. I'd rather not get into the specific technology because we're testing different technologies and different ways to do it. But there's several different ways that we can have that vehicle be able to machine read a sign, be able to give it instant information and or connectivity to a database that we can give it further information.
Okay, fair enough. Go ahead.
It's really just around the technology of a machine being able to read a sign is really what we're looking at this point.
Well, and to pick up on the theme of redundancy, which is something that you keep coming back to. Part of the project that you've got going on with MDOT it involves DSRC, the digital short range communication. How far away are we from that, and what needs to be done to the existing infrastructure to work with that technology?
And this is a great question, and I'm not sure that I'm going to totally be able to answer the question, because this is a discussion that the world is having at this point. I think there's many different different discussions around this, whether DSRC will be the end-all technology or cellular 5G technology at some point with a greater latency to be able to have quicker response time. So really, the way that we're going at this is more around what type of messaging, mostly for the 3M. The 3M business, we're more interested in obviously vehicle to infrastructure as opposed to vehicle, and so it's important for us to basically understand how that messaging will be done. Whether it be in cellular or in DSRC. It's not that important to us which one is chosen at the end. It's more important to us to make sure that the messaging is safe and secure and helps with the greater safety and mobility for the future. We are involved in DSRC specifically around test tools. 3M does manufacture a test tool that's used by academia, used by government agencies to test the standard and the messaging that has been put forth already around that DSRC, dedicated short-range communication.
But 3M isn't. You're not looking at getting into manufacturing roadside units, either DSRC or 5G at this stage.
I won't say we are or we're not, but I will say that we have different ideas on more of, like I mentioned earlier, communications between vehicles and infrastructures, and if we need to be involved in roadside units, we will be involved in roadside units.
So what sorts of messages are being transmitted on this system that you're testing now with MDOT?
So the most of the testing that was done through MDOT was around messaging vehicle to vehicle, and it was done through platooning. So most of that, the test tool that we had in that corridor was really making sure that messaging that was happening as they were testing platooning on the corridor was the right messaging, and we were logging it and providing that back to the companies that were creating the systems for that platooning. It was more testing to the standard.
Okay, there's been a lot of talk about the future of mobility and autonomous cars. I think it makes great headlines. It makes for intriguing news stories, especially with the gee-whiz nature of it. We're certainly intrigued and encouraged. But what I've found, too, is when you start to implement technology, and not necessarily specific to the Connected Roads program, but I'd love to hear your take on it. For example, here in Massachusetts, our commuter rail operator is in between this rock and a hard place. They want to promote usage of the commuter rail. To do that, they need to offer certain amenities. One of them, is better Wi-Fi coverage. Well, to make that work, they have to put up Wi-Fi towers along the tracks. Some communities have pushed back on that, saying that it's going to harm the character of the town, which has temporarily stalled the project. So as technology sort of progresses, the way to make all of this stuff possible, to make the roads of the future, do you anticipate any pushback? Are you ready for it? Have you gotten any already?
We believe our message around 3M Connected Roads is mostly around how we can help enable infrastructure. I believe it's very sexy to talk about automated and connected vehicles. I think the press does like to pick up on a lot of stories around the actual vehicles and the systems in those vehicles and them being on the roads in a very short period of time. It's our belief that the infrastructure isn't quite ready for that. We believe that there's not enough redundancies, as we mentioned earlier, to be able to safely navigate those vehicles. I think there's lots of discussions around what you're referring to around public transportation, around intelligent transportation systems, and how to get people to locations quicker, and how to re-navigate people in congested areas and move them to different roads to be able to decongest certain areas within cities as we see, greater urbanization and people moving to the cities. So, our at 3M, we're really interested, again, back to the safety and mobility and helping to consult DOTs and government on how to begin to be ready for these automated vehicles, for example, on the roadways, and what types of technologies will help create these redundancies to keep people safe and bring them home to their families.
The only issue with that is, who's going to pay for all this? We have a hard enough time getting people willing to, Americans be willing to pay taxes just to support, the most basic infrastructure. Getting funding, just to keep our bridges from falling down and our roads from crumbling has become increasingly difficult over the years. So, if we have to significantly upgrade our infrastructure to support automated and connected vehicles, how's that going to happen?
And I absolutely agree with you. And the perspective from 3M is really around cost neutral types of technologies that can be able to be used to enable the safety. So when you start to talk more about roadside units and DSRC, there is the belief that there's added cost. There will also be added safety by having some of these technologies, but really the areas where we're involved in, we're much more interested in how we can embed different technologies into current infrastructure, make that current infrastructure better as it evolves, have the vehicles be able to sense these technologies in those inclement weather conditions, and do it all at a cost neutral, because we are aware, we deal with the DOT every day, and we know that there's budget constraints, and we know that it will be very difficult to add cost to some of these technologies, even with the fact that we're trying to create greater safety for the taxpayers who are out there.
I'm curious about, at the end of it, what does a successful outcome look like to you for this current project that you're running? Certainly the successful outcome can mean a lot of things as we get into the future, but...
Our mission, again, as I mentioned earlier, is to get families home safely. We subscribe and are affiliated with different Towards Zero fatalities, Towards Zero deaths. There's different groups. We're working with the DOTs to help them drive towards zero fatalities. So when we measure different safety technologies and different infrastructure that we're trying to help provide, we're looking at how we can drive towards that zero fatality and looking and trying to measure the data to drive towards that point so that everybody gets home safely.
Okay. Well, great. I think my final question, and Sam, you can jump in if you've got anything afterward, but I'm just curious what gets you most excited about the project that you're working on.
I believe this has been a very fun experience for me in my career. This is clearly a mega trend, automated and connected vehicles, and I believe that through these technologies at 3M, we can help bring people home safely. We can add value to taxpayers and DOTs who are trying to protect those people on the roads, and so it gets me very excited. It's a very exciting industry right now, as we mentioned earlier, around the sexiness of automated and connected vehicles, and we believe that we can help enable those vehicles on the roads. So.
Great. Thanks very much. I'm satisfied. I learned stuff. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Sam, or we?
No, just that, in my daily role as an analyst covering the connected and autonomous vehicle space, there's a lot of fascinating things going on, and I think there's huge potential for some real societal benefits from this technology. But it's going to be crucial that we do it the right way. We're careful about how we do it to make the system as robust as possible, so that it does meet consumer expectations. Because I think there's the risk with some of the companies that are involved in this, that they don't take the safety aspect really as seriously as perhaps they should, and don't really understand how. What the consequences of doing things wrong are. I think the auto industry, and its supplier base are certainly not perfect. They've made plenty of mistakes, but I think they've come to understand over the years, that you have to test stuff a lot more carefully, and you have to really take into account the consequences of failure. Which, in this case, can be life or death, as opposed to, just having an app crash on your phone. And so it's great to see companies like 3M really taking a look at, some of the things that don't get thought about enough, I think, by a lot of the people involved in the space.
Well, great. So, Colin Sultan from 3M, thanks very much for talking to us, Wheelbearings, about connected roads. Any final parting words?
Yeah, thanks.
No, I appreciate the time. I agree with the last comment, and I believe that safety is at the utmost importance when we start talking about automated and connected vehicles and the testing that's being done today.
Good. Well, thanks for all your hard work. I look forward to reaping the benefit of the research and development in the future as a driver.
Thank you for your time.
So many thanks to our old Autoblog colleague, Alex Nunez, for helping us set that up with Colin from 3M. I had no idea that they could sort of encode information in just a road sign by having it reflect other light frequencies that are undetectable by the human eye. That blew my mind. I was like, well, yes, it's obvious, but also I would never have thought of that.
Yeah, no, they're doing some interesting stuff, and I've had some other conversations with 3M. They're also working on things like the coatings for the sensor windows on automated vehicles. Things both coating them with different colors, so that it blends into the bodywork of the vehicle, so you don't have all these obvious windows scattered around the car, but also things to try to prevent stuff from sticking to it. Things like salt and slush and dust and other substances that can obscure the vision of those sensors. So 3M's doing a lot of interesting stuff, and I think they'll be playing an important part in the future of automobiles.
All important stuff.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I think we've successfully come to the close of another podcast. So.
All right, and we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
All right, bye.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to fling your favorite fishing rod around. And here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance covers your boat and your belongings. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to high-five someone. But not while you're holding your fishing rod. That's a prized possession. So hold on tight with both hands and keep it covered through boat insurance. Get more with Geico.